Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Scouser Tommies in the week that saw Rangers invade Liverpool, maybe not, and saw us look forward to playing against Arsenal, who seem to be doing quite well at the moment, and maybe see us sort of thinking back a little bit to how we played against Brighton, and doing all of this, soaking wet through in this occasion. On this occasion is Jay Reid, and I believe, if there was a game of footy today, it wouldn't be the best day for one, would it?
Yeah, slide tackles only. That would be the rule of the day. But yeah, it's not a pleasant day in Liverpool in terms of the weather. But we go into the weekend on the back of a win. Given where we were probably 4 or 5 days ago prior to Rangers, a lot of, the mood has sort of shifted in a more positive direction. And I think we recorded last weekend, we said, these 4 games coming up are pretty big. The double-headed against Rangers, Arsenal and City. We've overstepped the first little hurdle. The bigger tests are to come away from home and then Man City. So hopefully things are starting to go in the right direction, and if that is due to the change of formation, if that's due to other things, we'll get into the meat and veg of it. But hopefully now we not another false dawn like Bournemouth, I think we're hoping for.
Yeah, I think I was saying on Raw the other day that I think Dave was quite disappointed that we'd not obliterated Rangers, because the way we played and the way they played it, if you sort of look at that and you'd seen that game and you'd assume this was the Liverpool of a year ago, you'd expect it to be big scores by the end of the game, because Liverpool at that time was so ruthless and so ruthless going forward and in defence that it could have been a hammering. But I think I said actually that in some ways I'm glad it was only 2-0, because you wouldn't want us to kind of, when we won that game by 9-0, it was as if we thought, we sorted it now, everything's fixed, and just assumed it would all just work next game, and it obviously doesn't work that way. And I mean, the formation, I don't know if it was a surprise or not. I think it's good to see it. I think from my point of view, I've always said that one of the things I'll praise Jurgen Klopp for is that he gets things wrong, everyone does, but he recognises it and he fixes it. He tries something else and he fixes it, and eventually gets it all working again. And he teaches his players to do that, and that's kind of gone through the whole club. But it just felt like it was a long time coming this season that something was broken, but they either couldn't accept it was broken or didn't know how to fix it. I don't know. Do you think that we could have moved to this sooner? Have people been calling for this, or is it just one of those things, something to try and it worked out well?
I think it depends how you look at the game, really, how you view football, and whether you view it, just as a game of football or, tactically or statistically. Because I think we've sort of shifted set up in terms of, on paper it looks like a 4-3-3, but quite clearly the right side of midfielder is not playing right side of a midfield three as we know it. He's playing a lot more advanced, and people could say maybe we were in a 4-2-3-1 by design, maybe, I don't know, because we were playing, that midfielder was a lot more advanced, and we did leave the two in midfield, and sort of leaving the back door wide open has cost us a lot. And maybe it was just, instruction rather than actual, full-on change. As it doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out. If you look at Jordan Henderson, who's played right side midfield and then played in the midfield 2 on Tuesday night, his heat map showed he was a lot more structured and diligent and stayed in position as to where he would have been had he, the nominal 4-3-3 as it was. And when we did sort of change it up with the substitutions and it looked maybe like it was a 4-3-3, it could have just been personnel reasons, but we did look a lot more open and a lot more loose in possession. But it comes down to, diligence and being structured in what you're told to do. And, I'm not picking on Henderson here, I'm picking on the whole midfield. If whoever's been in there this season, it's been far too open. So if it's a case that, the two lads who are in the centre of the park are nailed down to a position, and I think I mentioned last night on Twitter that, it's sort of like having a dog lead on someone and making sure that they don't go too far. They can only go a certain distance from you. It just keeps it tight. And I think, there was moments in the game where naturally, I think, given the whole hyperbole about Trent and his position of defending and stuff and whatever, he did rein himself in a little bit, but he still got forward, and the goal was magnificent, and that relieved a lot of pressure, I think. But I think naturally we were just a little bit more settled and structured of shape rather than being a bit free flowing, and that could not necessarily be a bad thing. I think we said before, getting back to basics might just be what we needed to do to then build again, sort the foundations out, and then the house will build itself.
I've spoken in the past to coaches involved with Liverpool, in sort of involved in Liverpool for years, involved behind the scenes at different levels and that at different times. And I think a question I've sometimes asked them is, do you pick your tactics and then pick the players for it, or do you, and then or do you look at the players you've got and play tactics that suit the players? And I think the answer usually that comes back is that you want to try and get the players that work with the tactics you want to play, but sometimes you've got to look at it and think, that player is not going to be any good in that position. There isn't anyone good enough to do that role. And if we try that, it's not going to work. And you've got to accept that for the time being, you've got to do things in a different way. And I'm just wondering how much that's played a part. That there's been a bit of an acceptance now that this is the midfield we've got until players come back from injury or until another transfer window gives us an option to go out and buy. This is the midfield we've got. These are the players we have. The form they're in, the confidence they've got, whatever else, we've got to work with that. And we've said before, I don't want to ever go at Henderson, but Henderson isn't as young as he was, and maybe that does take away some of that freedom that maybe he's had before, that, keeping him, as you say, restrained just keeps him in control. And I wonder how much that has played a part, that maybe there's a bit of an acceptance that whatever happens in the transfer window, you can cry and moan and whinge about whose fault it is and how many £billion players you wanted to buy, but once that window's shut, that's what you're stuck with. And it feels like now we've kind of accepted this is what we've got. And as players come back and as confidence increases, maybe we can use the other tactics more. But I don't know, I get the feeling we're going to use these new tactics more often than not, for the time being at least.
Yeah, I think I would like to see us stick to it. I know there's games coming up, and it may mean that personnel, but maybe not be as attacking as what we've seen on Tuesday night. But you take the opposition into account, and Rangers aren't very good, Arsenal are decent, Man City a different level. So over the next 3 games, if we do keep with this tactic, obviously the rotation will come into play because it's a busy period, and that's natural. But I think you see the old cliche of horses for courses, and there will be personnel to fit maybe the opposition more than the tactic itself. If it's something new that we're working on, then you've got to give it time. I think it was Dave who mentioned on the Raw pod that naturally Jota in behind Núñez didn't seamlessly work too well. There was moments of good in the game, but there was moments of not necessarily bad, but where you wanted more of a technical player, such as a Firmino, or maybe in time a Carvalho in there who naturally plays in that withdrawn position. But the option we have got is we've got plenty of attackers, and we've got the facility to use them in different ways. So if we go into Sunday with this, I would hope it's enough, and it wouldn't be a bad thing to go down and knock Arsenal down a peg or two, because everyone seems to be, bigging them up as some sort of title challengers. But what 8-9 games in, I think they've had one or two decent opposition games, and they dropped points against United of all them. So, this is the acid test for them, and then we will see where we are as well, because, as I've said, it's a big week in terms of fixtures.
Yeah, and it's a massive game against Arsenal, because I don't know what it is. They've generally been good games, and they've not always gone with the sort of form for the rest of the season anyway. It's often been a sort of truth-telling game, if you like. I can remember it was probably Kenny's last season as manager last time, this season, if you like, that he... there was a game at home against Arsenal, and we lost 2-0, and I think that was really the end of our hopes of getting what we wanted out of the league. I think it was more for Champions League, from what I can remember now. Such a long time ago. And I can remember everyone leaving before the end, and that's the kind of game you don't want against Arsenal, where you just let them write the script. We can write the script for this game. We can be in charge. We can make it go the way we want it to go. We can give them a shock. We can remind them who we are. And I'm hoping this is the kind of stuff that's going on in the dressing room. And I think one big difference between this weekend's game and last weekend's game is that I don't care how much you tell players that they should respect everyone they play and all the rest of it. There's a big difference between how you're going to feel before an Arsenal game and before a Brighton game. It shouldn't be that way. You should respect everyone, especially the way Brighton are playing now. But it doesn't happen. And it even happens in the crowd sometimes. I don't know if you find this. Sometimes you play a game against a lower down the table type of team, and the crowd aren't as up for it as they are against a higher up the table kind of team. And that, to me, reflects that bounces into the team, into the players. The players have less than, I don't know, everyone's at 80% or 90%, and all of a sudden you might have a problem. And this is one of my frustrations with how Liverpool have played. I'm not blaming the fans, but we all have our part to play when we're in that ground. But it's not been at 100%. And we always seem to find in the last few seasons, however we've been playing generally, we generally find 100% against the bigger teams. Even if we don't end up winning, it's not through want of trying. And I just think that's why we're maybe hopefully that's going to be what we see on Sunday, and that'll get us through. But really, we need to start showing it against the Brightons of this world, because if we don't, we're never going to win anything.
Yeah, the atmosphere is a long debated topic. What I will say is Tuesday night it was a lot better. I think group games in the Champions League can sort of be here and there. I think if anyone's being truthfully honest, the European nights in the knockout stages are where the true Anfield atmosphere is at. But I think going into the game, the talk from Rangers themselves, they were bringing 20,000. I didn't think they did. I think they brought about 6 or 7.
Did you see the picture going around on Twitter and saying this was the Rangers fans in Liverpool City Centre earlier, and it was actually a picture of Manchester, picture of Piccadilly Gardens?
Well, I didn't know it was Manchester because I'm not familiar with the city centre you are more than I. But it was made a big deal of, and for all the drums and 80s nostalgia that they still live in, they very much sort of faded into the past. I had to laugh at the fact that the entrance to their team with the Ultras banner with red flares when you're at Anfield was a classy move considering they play in blue. And then I heard them once in the whole game after they put the blue carrier bag flags down that they were waving. I only heard them once. Literally, I've seen European teams of much smaller calibre come to Anfield and make a hell of a lot more racket. Anzi McCatchkiller don't even exist anymore. I think they existed for about 20 years. They came once and they made a lot more noise. Yeah. And they were a made-up club in Russia for a few years. Yeah. And
also, most fans, when they come to Liverpool for a European game, and I feel we're mostly the same way when we go to someone else's city for a European game, they get welcomed, they take part, they enjoy it, and it's great culture. I mean, I've been stood on Anfield Road with as the coach has been coming in with fans from, like, say, Borussia Dortmund or whatever, and everyone's getting on great. You're with your own mates, you're with your own little groups of fans from your own club, but there's no sort of animosity whatsoever. It's like two sets of giants or whatever, two European clubs respectfully getting ready to fight on the pitch, and that's all. But yeah, don't know what it is with Rangers. They just don't seem to be in that world, and I don't know whether it's because they got the blue shirts and that they just remind me of another club, but it's less than full of class, isn't it?
There's a lot of similarities between them and other clubs in blue shirts. Normally, the one across Stanley Park, the one that play in Stamford Bridge, the one that play in the Den in London.
Yeah,
they all seem to have the same sort of mentality of fan culture, if that's what they want to call it. But yeah, full wholeheartedly agree that they live in a little weird mentality zone, and there was some comedy moments from the Kop, some good songs of banter, which I'm sure rattled a few cages down there, and where to stick the royal family.
Oh, I said, you can stick
when they try to stick your national anthem there as well. Members of the royal family and their history and stuff, like, we wouldn't let them forget. If they want to be royalists, then we'll let them know the truth about royalism, and what actually is the truth and what's going on. But coming to Anfield and singing the English national anthem is just laughable. Like, if that's the sort of thing that you come with, like, we often stand there, me and my mates, and say, like, it's championship or lower league behaviour, because you go through the whole repertoire of songs like "You Nicked Our Car Stereo," "Where's Your Famous Atmosphere," all the the lower league bingo chants, and true to form, they pulled them all out for what you could hear, and they labelled themselves as bears more than teddy bears, more than grizzly bears. But if they're going to create some sort of atmosphere next week at Ibrox, I don't think it'll actually phase our lads, because they seem to thrive, I think, in not necessarily hostile atmospheres, because we have seen ourselves crumble in places like Red Star Belgrade, but that's really scary. That's not going to Scotland and being loud. I do think sometimes the crowd sort of edges us on, and you look at the South American lads in the team, and we can get into their performances tonight, but I think they thrive in loud, passionate atmospheres, because it's the type of people and the cultures they come from that they want it to be vibrant and lively, because it sort of pumps their adrenaline up and makes them play an extra 5%. So I'm not too worried about going there next week. I think the emphasis has got to be on the first goal. You said yourself on Raw that it was nice to see that we didn't concede the first goal and we kept a clean sheet. If we go there and we get the first goal and maybe get a second like we did, in the game this week, I think we'll probably silence them to an extent, and that puts them out the competition effectively then. And all being well, Napoli do the business. It effectively puts us 1 foot into the next round, which after the first game in Napoli, you will not be complaining from anyone that if we've got 9 points after 4 games.
No, that's true. And I mean, this is why, again, that I was thinking about what you said then about how knockouts are so different to group stages in the Champions League. And it's not just because you're one step nearer the final by the time you play in knockouts or whatever. It's because there's so much hinging on it. When Liverpool were making history in Europe back in the olden days, when it wasn't called the Champions League, but you had to be champions of the league or Europe to be in it, all the games were knockouts and all the games were exciting. So even if it was like an early round before Christmas, it was still a knockout. And if you were there for the second leg, it was all or nothing. You knew there and then whether you were going through or not. You could, or based on what the scoreline was at, you knew what you needed to get through. Whereas nowadays, it's kind of like, have you got your calculator handy? Let me just see. And how did we score against them? And what's the rules if this happens? And, and even if you're watching these games on TV, they start showing you all the permutations. And I'm sick of the as it stands league tables you always get on Champions League coverage to try to tell you what's going on. But it's like, we keep needing to see that. But, it is different, isn't it? And when we get to the stage where we're playing knockouts, I think the atmosphere boosts a level. But at least I think definitely if you come out of the 2 Rangers games with 6 points, you've really given yourself a massive chance of going through. 2 games left, one of them against the team you've already beaten. It's massive. So next week I think it'll be good. But before that, of course, got lots of other things to do, like play at Arsenal. We didn't do so well last weekend in the league, and it was depressing to watch. And I didn't really bother watching it back, to be honest, because I was just so fed up with it. And I think what really finalised my I mean, I wasn't, even when we were 3-2 up, I was thinking, we're lucky here. You know, I wasn't really ready to celebrate anything. And I thought, we've just got to watch ourselves. We've not got to think we've got the job done. And it's as if we did. And that third goal, I mean, forget what happened in the rest of the game. That third goal was embarrassing.
Yeah, you know what? I didn't watch match today because I was so frustrated. Going to the game and seeing, like, we were played off the park. In all respects to Brighton, they played us off the park. The football they played, it was like they had 12 men and we had 10 at times. So fair play and credit to them. And I think you said earlier on, like, that Klopp does to get it wrong at times, and then, you know, we will find ways to fix it. But I think he got quite a lot wrong last weekend, from team selection to substitutes, to just, you know, the way we approached the game. Like, I thought it was a bit of a poor excuse to come out and say, like, we didn't know what Brighton were going to bring. Like, you prepare your team, obviously, to face an opposition, but you'd also prepare the team to go out and do the best that they can, and, you know, put a team to bed regardless. And especially at home, you shouldn't be going into a game fearing what Brighton might bring or anything like that. We certainly should be going there and putting our mark on the game. So
yeah,
that was a bit disappointing. And I didn't think at any moment in the game we were safe, as you said, when we went 3-2 up. I thought we need a 4th or 5th here, because these are cutting through us like a knife through butter. It was frightening at times, and, you know, if only Brighton had an actual proper centre forward, not Danny Welbeck up there, it could have been a lot more. So credit to them, but I would like to think, you know, we've seen this too many times. If the fans are noticing what is wrong on a regular basis, surely Klopp and the coaching team have seen enough, and they can't be blind to what's actually going on. Put loyalties aside, if that's what the case is. We really need to sort it out. And as you say, going into Arsenal is a bit of a bigger test. But I've just seen a stat that the last 6 games we played against them, Arsenal haven't scored against us. So if we can make it 7, that would be good. I know that it goes across various competitions, but, you know, 6 games against them, they've not scored against us. And I wouldn't be surprised if Diogo Jota's probably bagged in 5 or 6 of them games, because he seems to have some sort of hex over them.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, it's the most obvious thing to say in football is that if they don't score, they can't win, you know. And so
the old Michael Owen quote.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't want to sort of bring his name into it because feel sorry for him sometimes, you know. But I don't really. It's just that's the key. I mean, you as you said, I mentioned the other night about not conceding. I think in normal times, if you said to me, what would I rather have, a 4-3 win or a 1-0 win, I'd have a 4-3 every time, because you think, how exciting would that game be? But at the moment, I think we need 1-0s and 2-0s if we can, because we just need it. You know, we need to keep them to 0. We need to do that as much as possible. We need to stop chasing games, because if we don't do that, it'll feel like we're going back to the days of Brendan Rodgers. Now, I can't remember if I even said that on Raw the other night, but it's something that's been crossing my mind for the last few weeks, that we had some exciting times under Rodgers, but then you think about it, we didn't have many, like a lot of our wins were like close. You know, we'd conceded, but we'd scored, and we'd always scored more than them. And that's what has got us close to the title. But in a way, it's what lost us the title, because we were sloppy at the back, and that's not got to happen. But that little bit of news we've had from Klopp today suggests, and what we saw the other night on the bench as well, so it suggests that we're maybe getting to a point now where there's actually some competition in the back four, which I think we alluded to this last time as well. Footballers are competitive beasts. They need to know that, you know, they need to know they've got to fight for things, and fighting to keep your place, fighting to get back into the team is so important. And I think that is going to make a big difference now, because, you know, we've missed our strongest back four this season. Even when the so-called members of the strongest back four have played, they haven't played the best. But as a unit, I think we're brilliant. And the only question is going to be is who gets the place alongside Virgil.
Yeah, and as good as Joe Matip's been in time for us, I can't honestly say he's been overly great this year.
No.
Neither's Virgil to that extent, and there's a theory going out there that he's just sort of getting himself through games at about 80% because he wants to make the World Cup, and you can understand that on a personal level because he's captain of his nation, and it may well be an opportunity that he might never get again because the Dutch have not qualified for previous World Cups.
But he could also be saying that because he wants to get himself through the season. He needs to do that.
Very true. Very true, given the season runs till, potentially the end of May/June. But I think, again, it all comes down to the old get your basics in order. And there was a moment the other night, and it's happened a few times this season for me, which is a bit concerning, that a player will run at Matip and just seem to glide past him with no attempt at a challenge. And it's one of them sayings that if you've played football at any level, you go and you take the man and the ball and you just don't let them pass at any cost, or you jockey them, you hold position. And quite a lot players have just drifted by Matip as if he's not there. And Gomez seen a lot of flack for that in earlier games in this season. And I don't want to say, one person's getting special treatment than the other, but Ibou Konate is on the verge of a first team appearance, and he was on the bench the other night. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him over the next couple of weeks, because he offers something that you don't get with Matip in terms of physicality and speed. You'd obviously get a lot more on-ball ability with Joel and his mazy dribbles upfield, but even this season I think we've only seen a couple of them, and it's healthy competition to have. And if we can get Konate featured in the next couple of weeks, maybe you then see the pressure's taken off Matip, and his performances when he is back in take an uptick, because it will help everyone. I think Klopp said today Robertson's very close. I wouldn't be surprised if he's dropped in against Rangers, because if there's one game in his career he wants to play, I would imagine it's away at Ibrox, being a Liverpool player and a Celtic fan.
Mm-hmm.
But Costas as well has performed very well. I thought, an able deputy, and if we can get young Calvin Ramsey fit on the right hand side and give some competition to Trent, I think that again will also help. So stability obviously is good, but healthy competition is also a help in terms of keeping players on the toes and increasing performance levels, because if your shirt is not guaranteed, it will obviously raise your performance level, or naturally it should do anyway.
Yeah, and I think that the other side to it as well is that, for years and years and years now, we've seen it where a young player gets a chance because of an injury or because of rotation or just maybe 20 minutes at the end of a game, wherever, and they impress. And that's what I think, if you're a young player on that bench or just ready to break into that squad, you want to take that chance with both hands, and you want to give the manager a really nice problem to have. And I think, that's something I'm hoping for. And from Trent's point of view, even if it's not competition, if it's someone that we can put in there that can do a decent job and make us not really feel like we're missing the Trent Alexander-Arnold at his best, if we're missing a player but we've still got someone good in there instead, that it means when we do use Trent, we'll hopefully get the best out of him. We don't want to overuse players, because it's easy to forget how young Trent is. And we laughed about Michael Owen before, and we just laughed about him because of one of his sayings, but one of the reasons I think his career could have been so much better had he not got all the injuries he got when he was younger. And a lot of people at the time said a lot of that was down to him playing so much football so young, and that must still have an impact. That's got to be in people's minds. And although Trent's not had many injuries so far, touch wood, you don't want him to get one. And the more chance you've got of that is if you play too many games. So we need that ability. And maybe that's it with Matip as well. I think ideally, Matip showed us such a good side to himself last season that we didn't need to use Konate as much as maybe we were expecting. We could bring him in slowly. But I do think the overall plan was that Konate and Van Dijk would be together, and Matip maybe as and Gomez as backups when we need them and when we need to swap players in and out. So, that could happen on midweek next week, because we've two massive league games either side. It'd be interesting to see how Klopp takes that. But, it's, to me, all 3 games are important. There's no way you can pick one over the other. We've got to win all 3 if we can. We've got to we've got to try and win at least 2 of the 3, Well, we've got to try and win them all. But really, you're hoping for at least 2 or 3 wins, I'd say.
Yeah, I think it's a must-not-lose situation across those 3 games. Obviously, for the reasons we spoke Champions League first of all. So, given what Napoli are performing in the group there on 9 points, if they should probably beat Ajax at home, they'll be on 12 and leave Ajax on 3. If we can get the job done in Rangers, it leaves us with a 6-point buffer on them and only a point required from the last 2 games to get through. But should the situation happen where we draw in at Ibrox, then we are on 7 points, and hopefully then a 4-point buffer over Ajax will then give us, again, a point required away at Ajax will see us through.
Yeah.
But given the league situation, and weird enough to say, looking over our shoulder, there seems to be a team in blue who've climbed up the table. Don't know how, but they've got there, and they're level on points with us, but the goal difference is 0. So that 9-0 win against Brighton and giving us a positive goal difference of 9 is actually doing us a favour at the moment. Yeah. But we're 7 games in, because we're obviously with a game behind a few teams, but just looking at the bigger picture, with 11 points behind Arsenal, we're 10 behind City. If you can make sure that gap doesn't get any bigger across the 2 games that you play against them, ideally you recoup some points on them and close the gap naturally. That would be a positive. But going to the Emirates and then home to City, I think if you offered it now, given what we've seen this season, would you take 2 draws from them games? You would probably realistically shake your hand and say, yeah, go on, we'll take that where we are right now. It's not good enough. It's not what we expect. It's not what we require. But where we are currently and what we've seen, I think realistically it wouldn't be a bad outcome. And then if you said you take a win from Rangers but 2 draws in the league, it puts you in a competition after Christmas where you want to be in the Champions League. You don't want to be knocking around the Europa League, because if anyone did bother to see what teams were listed in that competition last night, it felt like you were looking at the back of an ingredients of a package, some of the teams' names that were there. But you don't want to be in the Europa League. It's just not a competition that we would wholeheartedly respect to the teams in it. It's not where we should be. No. So I think it's a must not lose across these 3. Any wins, more than welcome. But yeah, that's the way I see it right now. Given where we are, it's not ideal, but we've just got to accept the reality of the situation.
Yeah, I mean, the Europa League, if you're sort of a club that's not played in Europe before or not played in Europe for a while, it's a stepping stone to the big one, isn't it? But for any Champions League club that finds themselves playing in it, you're being humiliated. You're on the naughty step. Don't get me wrong, if you're in it, you'll do everything you can to win it, but you just don't want to find yourselves in there. And I think where we found it a few years ago was okay. We were playing in it. It was at least we were in Europe after not even managing that for a while. But it would feel so alien now to see that. It's just not right. It's not us, is it? You're right. And we've got to fight to keep in there. And that's another reason though why we've got to be careful in the league, because, there's not, although, eventually UEFA want to allow about 40 teams from the Premier League into Europe, even though there's not 40 teams in it. You've got to finish top 4 as far as I know, unless they've changed that again. And we've got to fight to do that at the very, very least. And I think I'd love us to win both the games. Like you say, we can't afford to lose anymore. Draws put you on at least put the brakes on how much of the gap's going away from you. And that game that we're short of course, is against Chelsea. So that's another one that we need to get something from. And I think looking at the table after me slagging it off, I think there was, I did see a sort of live table at some point during the game the other day against Brighton, and we were not that far off the top if we win. And then of course we draw and it sends us down. So as demoralising as it's been so far this season, we are only just in the part of the season where league tables really make any sense. There's still early days yet, so we've got a lot to look forward to. I just wanted to quickly touch on something that, back in 1989, before we can go back to Arsenal in a minute, because one thing Arsenal fans like to always talk about is 1989. When Arsenal fans talk about 1989, they mean something different to us, so we'll come to that in a minute. But from our point of view, 1989 is obviously the year of the Hillsborough disaster, when 97 people died because of what people who weren't doing the jobs properly caused. It's been well documented eventually. The truth's out there eventually. And now people who did wrong, because it wasn't just people on the day, it was people afterwards. So much went wrong and so little justice has been done for it. But I just wanted to sort of point out that the Home Office has had to apologise to the Hillsborough victims' relatives, because a review into the failings of the pathology, the pathology reports and all the rest of it that went on at the time, there were so many failings in it. There's a review started on that. Now, no one bothered to tell any of the families of the victims that this was starting. They found out through the media. And I can't help but think, and call me cynical if you want, but I've got every reason to be. I can't help but think that the Home Office thought, right, let's kick it off now, put a press release out. There's that much crap going on in the world. There's horrible stuff happening, in Asia. There's horrible stuff happening with Ukraine, with Russia, what they're doing. And we've got a government that's so incompetent, they're taking up a hell of a lot of the news space, changing their minds on things that they've done wrong and hoping we don't notice the other things they've done wrong. And it felt like, yeah, we'll put a little note out saying that we started this review and hopefully it won't make the news. Well, it did make the news, and that's how the families found out about it. And as this country, this is part of the reason we boo the national anthem, because the government and the country, that establishment, that machine, doesn't give a damn about people like us. It just doesn't. We're in the way. We're absolutely in the way. And if we weren't in the way, they'd have shown some respect and told the families about this. So I'm fuming about that. Am I right? I don't know.
No, rightly so. The family of the Hillsborough sufferers, well, I've never ever been left in peace, and I don't think they ever will do, sadly, because, as you said, that the establishments that are in place in this country don't seem to want to do the right thing for the common people, only for themselves or for those around them who they deem in privileged positions, and they don't want to do the right thing, which is, put the people who were rightfully at blame for what went on to rights, really. And I would not be surprised if, when these people who done wrong at the time pass away, that all of a sudden, the blame will be then pointed in the direction, much in the case of, TV personalities who've had checkered histories during the 70s and 80s. And once they've passed away, the finger of blame is rightfully put in their direction because, there's nobody to answer for it.
Yeah.
And call me cynical about that, but I just think that is what's going to happen when the people at South Yorkshire Police are no longer around. Only then will the families sort of get a genuine answer, which we've all known for years and years. We just actually want the truth to be out there. And, it's a lot of Hillsborough angst also stems down to a media publication, which we don't speak of. But the fact that the families, once again, have been heard and found out something via the media just shows how shambolic this country actually is in terms of how it's run, and the media manipulation of what goes on. They've got far too much power and they've got far too much right to say things and influence people. And sadly, there seems to be a lot of people who take their word at face value. Or your heart goes out to these people because they shouldn't be going through this. It's 33 years on now. I've only been around. I'm 35. I don't remember Hillsborough as an actual disaster, being physically able to see what happened, but brought up in the city and brought up around people who got very strong personal links to Hillsborough. You're more than educated in what went on. And, you know, it makes me angry just to see that it keeps getting pulled back up, and it's opening up a wound within these families that should really be healed and left to rest, but it never will. I don't really know what much more to say on this, because it's that, in a sad way, it's not a surprise that something is happening in the background, and the people affected aren't being told about it, because it's just the shambles that this country is at the moment. And yeah, those who were small-minded enough to think, why are Liverpool fans booing the national anthem? They're disrespectful to the Queen or the King or the royal family or whatever. No, it's not. We're not necessarily a royalist club, and you know the team we played on Tuesday are, and they were rightfully booed out the park when they did start singing it. But it's not about that. As you say, it's more about the way we're treated by the nation, by the state, by the government, by the authorities. That's what it's all about, because people who hold them up in high regard are, you know, the antithesis of British, and think that all holy Britain and, you know, the British Empire still rules Britannia and all this bollocks and crap. Well, it doesn't. The reality is we're in the 21st century, and some people still live in the 20th or the 19th century. And yeah, it gets to you, because, you know, you think, are we the odd ones out, that we live in this city and we just see things for what they are and the reality of it? But I don't think we are. I think we're just open-minded, and we have our eyes and ears open to all things that go on, and we don't take no crap. We don't listen to what's being fed to us. We just see things for what they really are. And
yeah,
you know, you can see through the smears, because that's what it is. It's media smears once again.
That's the thing. The thing about Liverpool is, like, we've joked about it, but yeah, there's no messing. If you've got a bad haircut, you'll get told. If you've got something dodgy on your feet, you'll get laughed at. You'll get told. You'll get put in your place. People tell you straight what they think, and you know, they don't hide it, and they don't always do it in a bad way. They do it, you know, in a well-meaning way, and it's all a good laugh and all the rest of it. But that's the thing. People will tell you straight what they think about something, and you know, they'll be honest with you, and that's what's been so against what we're used to, the way that we've been treated, is that there's not been a drop of honesty and a drop of integrity and a drop of wanting to do the right thing. The two sort of mayors of the Northwest, if you like, Steve Rotherham, who's Liverpool City Regions, and Andy Burnham, who's the Everton supporting Mayor of Greater Manchester, has said, while justice has never been served for those who lost loved ones in that tragedy, we'll not stand by and allow the establishment to conduct investigations without any recourse to the feelings of family members. And it's that thing, it's feelings, and it's not just 97 people died because people were bad at their jobs and didn't care about football fans then. Countless more suffered as a result, people who were survivors and their families. And what's happening here is it's just being dragged on and on and on. And there's just not one bit of sort of genuine compassion, because you can say sorry all you want, but it's about time that they showed they were sorry. Really, really is time they showed they were sorry. And I'll tell you now, they're not going to be allowed to let it lie. This will keep going if we have to. And I just want to spur a thought for everyone who's been affected by this, because I know how hard it is for people. And, you know, just as you think you can start getting on with your life, stuff like this happens. So I hope it does come to an end sooner or later and you can start to move on. And we'll move on now, just to change the mood slightly, because 1989, I did mention it, was when Hillsborough happened, we were sort of behind on our league games, and the decision was made we'd play games, and we had that amazing cup final, which you won't remember, against Everton, of course, but you'll know all about. But the bit we don't talk about much is Arsenal played Liverpool, and it was now the last game of the season. This was unusual at the time, because usually last game of the season was 3:00 Saturday, and it wasn't live on TV. It was just on Match of the Day or whatever later. But because of what had happened, it ended up being a nighttime game at Anfield, and all Liverpool had to do was not lose by 2 or more goals. And it just felt like we've got it sorted. And I don't know what it was, but Liverpool just went into the game like we'd already got it sorted. We didn't need to do anything. And although it feels hard to kind of criticise the team too much because of what was going on around it, it still guts me to this day that they did that to us. And I wonder. That's the reason I mentioned it, really, is it's come to my mind that night, and the way I've felt ever since, that we went out playing for a draw. and assume that would be enough, because you play for a draw, and even if you end up losing by the odd goal, you're still going to win what you want. And obviously that didn't happen. Could you imagine Liverpool playing for a draw this Sunday? Could you cope with that? Could you cope with them doing that against Man City? As much as you say a point would be good, how would you feel if we were sort of 1-1 with 10 minutes to go and we started shutting up shop at the back and not looking to score?
I suppose it takes the context of the game, doesn't it? You could probably... You can't give an honest, truthful answer until the situation presents itself, because, you know, if the situation was we were 1-0 down and we've clawed ourselves back into the game, got a 1-1, and you're hanging on for the last 10 minutes, then you think, well, you know, a draw's a great result. But if you flip the shoe on the other foot, and much similar to the Brighton situation at the weekend, where you take a lead and then, you know, a team fights the way back and the momentum is more in their favour, and you end up hanging on for a draw, it ends up feeling like a defeat in some regards. So, you know, I don't know. Obviously it's situational dependent, but I think, as you say, given that game in 1989, I think we did sort of set our stall out from all accounts to just take a draw from the game, and it come off the FA Cup final. There was talk that like players were still on the piss because that's what they used to do back in them days, because, you know, footballers were human, they weren't robots.
I've heard stories from ex-players about the kind of drinking they did back then. I'm not sure it always actually makes public. It's not for public consumption. It's unbelievable. Surprised you're still alive, to be honest.
Yeah, it's just, you know, football was different back then. Some people will say that was real football. Some people will argue otherwise. It just depends on, again, how you view the game, which is what I said earlier on. But I don't think... I'm in a situation where if a draw was presented to me now, I would take it. But
of course,
I know going into that game that, you know, we've got a better starting 11 than Arsenal every day of the week, like, and twice on Sundays. Like, you put our strongest 11 up there, we beat them. And it's not even a close contest, because yes, they've got good players, yes, they've got young, talented, up and coming, but they've done nothing in the game. Like, the only one genuine like winner they've got in their team is Gabriel Jesus, and he's only won things because he was at City when they were winning things. It's a bit like saying, you know, John O'Shea was a winner at Man United because he was a squad player in a team that won loads of trophies. It doesn't really mean, yes, he contributed in parts and scored some goals, but Man City would have won them things regardless, whether they had Gabriel Jesus or not. So we've got genuine world-class players who are best in class or top three in that position. We've got people who've won the Premier League and Champions League and everything else that goes with it in the football game in England. You know, we should have more than enough that the managers alone are chasms apart in terms of what they are in the game. So I would always think going into playing them that we'll always have enough. And quite honestly, when you think back, the Emirates games can sort of be a little bit of nip and tuck, but I remember a lot of games over the recent times where we played Arsenal and we've just put them to bed because they think there's something that they're not. I'd be much more concerned if it was City this weekend and not Arsenal, but I think if we're being, you know, overly optimistic here, if we go into this game at the weekend and we come away with 3 points, we come away with a win at Ibrox, then you can wholeheartedly say that going into that City game, the mood will be ramped up, the positivity levels will be through the roof, regardless of what they're doing, and regardless of the robot that they've got up top. We will be in a different mindset, and I really, really would like to see that happen. Obviously, it's cliche, but we are just going to have to take each game as it comes. Yeah,
we are, definitely. And I think, you know, we can do that as well by looking at each game we've played in the past as well this season. And one that jumps out at me is the Charity Shield, or the Community Shield, sorry, to give it its modern name. We played them off the park well and truly in that game. You know, it was like, it was a bit of a false start in terms of what it said about the season, but we were just head and shoulders above them. And I don't believe anyone who says they weren't that bothered, they weren't that up for it, because they were up for it. They were as up for it as they would be for any other game. You know, we were sort of it was all about our first competitive game of the season for both sides. we were both as ready as each other, if you like, both as up for it as each other. But we just basically bossed them, and that's what's been so sad since. But again, as I mentioned early on, we do seem to be able to really raise our games against the so-called bigger team. So if we can play like we did in the Community Shield, we've got that one as well, haven't we?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of fans who went to that game and a lot of people who watched it and said, like, you're absolutely built us up to knock us down. Because going after that game and going into the season, we thought, well, you know, this is it. League's ours. Like, you know, Haaland isn't always meant to be. You know, Nunes is going to go in and outscore the lad, and, you know, how wrong were we at the time? But, you know, situations change, and, you know, a season's a long time, and as we've said, we're 7/8 games in. You know, it's not even a quarter of the way through the season, and it's a long, old, weird season. And I think we've referenced it before. We've just got to get to the World Cup break as it is, which is, I think, around about 5-6 weeks away from now. We're in touching distance of those at the top, because I think we all know history shows, especially under Jurgen Klopp, we are much stronger in the second half of the season. We've normally put runs together across multiple years of, you know, 9-10 wins on the spin, and we've clawed points back. We did it last year, and I wouldn't be surprised if we did go and maybe strengthen slightly in January, albeit if the player is available who we want. But I think we've just got to get to the World Cup point within, you know, grasp of those at the top, because, you know, we're not going to be, you know, level pegging with Man City or Arsenal by the World Cup break, because I think there's only half a dozen games to play, and we aren't going to claw that many points back. But if we can take some, and we can have ourselves in a position of, you know, 4th, 5th going into the World Cup break, because whether you're international football interests or not, you've got a long time to sit and look at the table, and if you're 5th or 6th, it's a lot better looking than, you know, being 10th and the team next year is Everton.
Yeah, my God, that's not a nice thing to think about, is it?
No, it's not a nice look.
We can cope with having them next to us, like with a park in between us, but, you know, that's not enough. And they're going to be even further away. So, you know, obviously, if that nice new stadium does get finished, and it's, as you said last time, it's getting close. I just wonder, like you said that the same as well. Like, we felt like it set us up for a season that we didn't expect, and it was like, we've got the league now, and it's been that sort of attitude. Is how I feel Liverpool have had this season, and, you know, it'll just come. You don't need to work for it. We do need to work for it. So I just wonder, I reckon it's about time we because anyone who remembers the old Liverpool boot room stories, and then if you talk to any of the players from that era, like Jim Beglin, for example, I did an interview with him a couple of times for Anfield Index, and he'll tell you all about Ronnie Moran and the way he was, that, you know, any praise you got from him was very quickly followed up with, right, anyway, that's over and done with now, on to the next game. You know, you could have your medals from last season, meant nothing in the new season. So I just wonder if maybe it's time we just got a Ronnie Moran poster on the dressing room door or something. So one of the last things they see before they leave that dressing room is an angry Ronnie Moran, just to remind them what jobs they've got to do. You know, and that's what we need. We just need to be remembering that, you know, all of us, if we're at the game or if we're on the pitch, you know, we've got to fight like mad. So we've talked quite a bit now about what's happened and what's coming up. Would you say that at this point in the season that, I mean, I think we're pretty much done now. I think we've done our losses. Am I right? Am I wrong? I feel like, you know, we can definitely come back from this, but I don't know. I'm just always like the optimistic person. I don't know if that's the right way to be or not, because then you can set yourself up for a fall. But I think you've got to be optimistic, got to be confident, but just never assume the job's done.
Yeah, I think we spoke last week, and we did we overlooked the Brighton game, and maybe that's what the team did, because you know, you probably put a big red circle around these 4 games that we've had 1-3 coming up, and, you know, no disrespect to Brighton and then the teams who we will play afterwards. I think we've got West Ham and the likes of Southampton and maybe Leeds up on the horizon as well, before we do have a little interruption for international football. But maybe the team has sort of just taken their eye off the ball one too many times, and, you know, circled on their calendars at home is Man City, is, you know, for Andy Robertson, it's Ibrox, it's Rangers away. For Diogo Jota, it's Arsenal again. For the matter of the fact that I said earlier on, he scored in his last 5 appearances against Arsenal. So if he can make that 6 and 6, that would be lovely. You know, players are human as much as we say the robots. Like, they just want certain fixtures as much as we do, and if we can come through the next week in a positive regard, no losses, you know, a draw or 2 wouldn't be the end of the world given the situation. But I tell you what, if we come out of this next 10 days, in 3 games, with 3 wins on the spin, make it 4, obviously, with what happened on Tuesday night, there'll be a whole different feeling around the club. And that's not just for the fan base, that's for, you know, the lads in and around the first team, the squad, the you know, the training facility, the coaches, the youth setup. Like, wins against rivals mean a lot. And, you know, Man City are only rivals because of what they've spent and where they are in the game at this current time. But, you know, Jordan to Everton felt like a loss. Jordan to Brighton felt like a loss because we were at home.
Yeah.
But, you know, these are moments in the year where, you know, you can't win and lose the title necessarily because, you know, there's points to play for, but you can certainly put a stamp down. And, you know, taking it back to the Community Shield, we put a stamp down then and the ink ran off the paper very quickly. We need to now restamp that with permanent ink and make sure we are putting a marker down for the rest of the league, and, you know, prove that we are not going through a transition, that we aren't necessarily struggling, that we are the force to be reckoned with.
I'm going to put you on the spot now. Can you think what your favourite moment or memory is of an Arsenal game, home or away?
I've got 2.
Yeah.
Only the sort of relatively recent. One was when we played Arsenal. Well, actually, both when we played Arsenal at home. One was in the league, and Firmino danced them through, and there was 4 of them on the ground.
Oh yeah,
they were playing in like the teal sort of shirts. I think we beat them 4 or 5-1. Oh, sorry, I'm going to make 3 points. the volley, the Suarez volley, that would have been one of the greatest goals ever when we absolutely demolished them. When Skirtle got 2 in about 10 minutes, and then that corner come in and he volleyed it from about 30 yards out and rattled the post. That probably shook Bruce Grobbelaar's piss all over the place. And then finally, it was a Champions League night, and I think we beat them. I don't know if it was 5-4 on aggregate or 5-4 on the night.
It was a match scoreline, wasn't it?
Yeah, there was a volley from Torres, and like he nearly took the roof of the net off at the cop end. He sort of span in behind and rifled one into the top corner and literally nearly ripped the back of the net off. If we can get Darwin Núñez doing that, it'd be lovely. Oh yeah,
that's what we're missing, isn't it? I mean, when Torres was at his peak and we all loved him, that they were special days in themselves. I mean, that mad advert with we'd all started to learn Spanish in Liverpool and stuff, which wasn't far away from the truth. In all honesty, we did love him that much at the time, but I can't remember what the advert was for. It was that good. Was it Nike? Long time ago.
Yeah, it was Nike, and it had the Torres song sort of humming in the background. But you know, Darwin the other night sort of gave me. We said it when he signed. He had like Torres sort of traits to him, but that shoot on sight sort of thing. And I know you said on Raw again. I've plugged you about 4 times because I was listening to the podcast last night. You know, Everton seemed to be down the keeper's throat or within like a yard of the keeper, and he got his hands or his feet to Everton. But it was just that I'm not messing around here. I'm in the box and the ball's going at goal, and it's going with power. And you know, you said yourself, sometimes a bit more, you know, collectiveness and calmness, and those sorts of shots are taken a little bit more precisely and going to the corners. But the fact that this lad is just getting the ball and he's just rifling at a goal, that's what sprung into my mind with that Torres goal, as you referenced the memories of Arsenal. He doesn't waste any time, and it'd be a good time to get off the mark this weekend, because although he's got one or two for us, it just still sort of feels like he's waiting for that big moment.
Yeah, definitely. I think. Yeah, I mean, this is it, and this is the thing. These are the games that dreams can be made from. I think if I was going to think, two quick memories of Arsenal for me, then I think when we beat him in the FA Cup at Cardiff, because it was just something about those games at Cardiff was a bit different, you know. And
Michael Owen.
And of course, Michael Owen and Robbie Fowler, and we couldn't get them all on the pitch at the same time. And we were spoilt for strikers at the time. It was a mad, and the fume from Arsenal and lots of other people because of Stefan Hand show, because of that handball. Well, you know, it wasn't given, so we played on. In fact, I don't even know if it probably would be handball now, but it probably wasn't then. But who cares? We won. And then the other one, I think one of my favourite memories isn't even about the game itself. It was just when Arsene Wenger lost his rag with Kenny, and Kenny just told him to piss off. It was just one of my favourite moments of all time in football. Because you don't really hear Kenny swear, although, you know, not in public. But that was a special moment. And let's hope there's another one on Sunday. And another one next week against Rangers. And so that by the time we next come back to you, we've got loads of good things to talk about. But at least for this week, we've definitely had some positives. We're definitely going in the right direction. The draw against Brighton could have had better. The win against Rangers, we could ask for more, but who cares? 3 points. And now 3 more of these big 4 games left and lots to play for. And hopefully, things are turning around. But for now, thanks for listening, and we will see you soon.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index, and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.